Welcome back to another special episode today of the Experiential Travel Podcast. Today's guest is the owner of an incredible YouTube channel called Nice Flippin' Choice and the owner of an incredible glamp site as well, the Cameron Ranch. He has a wealth of knowledge that we're going to jump into. And this is just going to be another great episode. Welcome, Garrett Brown.
How you doing? Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Let's
definitely ready to talk it.
Start me in the beginning. How did you get into this? Why glamping? Walk me through any experiences that you had before.
Sure. So I'm from Houston, Texas, born and raised. I went to University of Houston's Hilton College, which is their hospitality management. So that's where I graduated from. So I always wanted to do something with live music. And I grew up, when I say Houston, I grew up in Angleton, which is about an hour and a half from Houston. It's a little more country.
Okay.
But I always say Houston because most people would have no idea what Angleton is, but it's good for the story. So I grew up in the country, so moved to Houston, went to school there, worked in music studios there, but I got my degree in hospitality, and I always knew I wanted to do something with live music or something like that, but I was lucky enough to start working in music studios, and I was a music producer and DJ for quite a while. But I always had an itch for real estate. I started doing some small real estate investing. I was flipping some houses here and there. I was doing a little bit of Airbnb, trying to just get my feet wet with some, outside sources of, financial freedom. Like music, it's good money, but it's definitely more of like a rat race still too. It's your next check. Your next check, you're never guaranteed in that. So,
Rich dad, poor dad.
Yep, very much. So once I started kind of getting the itch for real estate, I really started to I started watching a lot of different YouTube channels. I started doing a lot of research, like Rob Built, who I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with in this type of community. He really put a lot of what some of his ideas were out there. I always were like, okay, there's some ways that I can be really unique and be creative, which are some of the things I like, but then also still be able to use my hospitality degree, really use the customer service factors that I know. I've worked in tons of restaurants, all those things like that. So I always have had a good relationship with customers to know how to deliver that type of experience to them. And I just started to do research, and I would crunch numbers too, because I was making smaller returns on just, generic condos in Houston. But once all the big money came in from, all the big corporations buying all the condos up to do the same thing, we couldn't really compete with them. But the place that I knew I could compete with once I started to crunch numbers was providing some type of really unique stay for people that you can't just get, it's very hard to find these types of amenities being out in nature. And we want people to disconnect, to reconnect with their loved ones. So we really wanted to push that atmosphere of being in the middle of nowhere, but still feeling as comfortable as you possibly could. So we really just started to me and my business partner, I kind of took a lot of the roots, taking my feet on the ground, finding different places, researching things. She's more of an, interior designer, kind of helped figure out themes and how we do rotating themes in a couple of our sites. And so once we started putting our brain together, we looked at tons of properties. It took about a year and a half of looking at places and researching before we actually pulled the trigger and landed on a property that we knew was the right one for everything. We started to narrow down, and then it just has came about. So it's probably been about 2.5 years in the making, and we've been officially open now for 3 months, and we've been, I think, 90% occupied every single month since then.
I love that. Now, we're gonna get into the whole process of it, but really quickly, there's so many people are scared to take that jump, right? Because they don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah,
it's a good, sizable amount of money. There's some worries and not knowing that if it's going to pay off or not, and then how incredible of a confidence booster and kind of an acknowledgement to what you and your business partner have done with those 3 months of 90% plus occupancy, and you're like, wait, we did this right. This was the right decision. Walk me through kind of a little bit of that.
So yeah, no, there's tons of fear, this is something that I sold a lot of things. I sold a condo I had in Houston I was living in. I sold my other 3 condo Airbnbs I had, and I pretty much put a lot of this I pretty much put, I won't say all I had into this, but very, very close, because I knew it was going to work though, and also the thing about it was I also took I don't want to say the safe route because this has not been a safe thing, but when I got the property, one thing I knew was that I wanted to buy a house on there. That was I was able to use and I'm sure we'll probably get further into financing of it later on, but I was able to use a 5% owner occupied loan on the property and get a nice house that still needed
Land
some
hacking,
work.
baby.
Absolutely, it still needed some work. And so I know in the end, like the equity will always be there in the place. So, my first few sites that are going to be on the land, it has 12 acres, but the first few sites, I knew that, they're not going to add a ton of equity to it because, one is a dome and then the next one, we might build a tree house. We have a couple ideas we already have a few things locked in, but some of these might not build that equity fully into it that you're banking on all cash flow. So we played a little bit of a safer route because now we have a property that is a legit asset that is now
Yep.
making us money on Airbnb and our own sites as well. But at the same time, we have some other cash flow plays that if the house doesn't really bank as much, these glamping sites are going to cash flow like crazy. They may how much they're worth in the end is up to a lot of appraisers and when you sell it and the business model. But if you get the cash flow out of them, you could sell it as a business. So we
Yep.
saw a lot of exit strategies, even though we don't plan on exiting anytime soon or at all or anything like that. But it's just that helped us feel much safer with a lot of our decisions because it has been a ton of time. One thing people that do underestimate it is how much time these type of sites actually do take, especially getting
Yes.
them set up and
Yes.
just infrastructure and dealing with people like the county and permits, and it's a lot
Yep.
of work. But that's why that's why you can get a lot of cash flow out of them because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of investors and other people that don't want to do this type of work. And so once I had decided that I would dedicate a lot of the time and all the finances that we had to put up as our own personal funds, we were a little scared, but having that balance of knowing how much research we did first, and then also like taking our time to find I don't want to say the perfect property because there's never a perfect property all the way, but finding one that we knew had so much upside and based off the equity and we saw so many other properties that we were like, okay, this is the one. Like we can just tell from there's there's so many pros to it and there's only one con, which is like that is almost as perfect a property as you're gonna get. Because if you find a property with no cons, then I don't know, you might need to go buy a lottery ticket that day too. 'Cause that's wild. 'Cause we looked at a
Well, I
lot
think
and would realize that there's always going to like multiple ones would be like, man, this is bad, and it would,
Mhm.
just it would get over with very quickly till we found that one.
That's incredible. Uh, we could dive into so much. I want to start off with how you learned, because I think the first part of starting a glamping business, starting an experiential travel business, or an outdoor hospitality business, there's so many different names for these things.
100%.
Is the education part. You really have to understand how much time it's going to take, roughly how much money it's always going to cost more money than you project. But
Absolutely.
how did you learn, and what are some good resources that you kind of relied on to start this journey?
So I've always been such a huge advocate of YouTube. People think I'm kind of crazy, but I learned to make beats off of you, which I'm a producer, like music producer by trade, and I learned to make beats off YouTube when I was like 13, and I made a career off that. So it's people have always thought it was crazy how much I thought I can learn on YouTube, and I proved it again with this glamping thing because it wasn't my sole source of knowledge. Because I also I have my real estate license as well, so I knew a lot about real estate to begin with, but YouTube channels from like Rob Built to Kai Andrews to I've watched yours quite a few times. There's so many out there that have different bits of wealth of knowledge that can really just kind of spark your creativity. And then you have like bigger pockets. I shout them out all the time too because I did learn my real estate investing basics. I learned from them, and they really teach you like how money moves within real estate, how you can make money move within real estate, and then in the thing I've always loved about real estate, because not glamping it's a hospitality business, but then it's also a real estate business kind of at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. There's a lot of bits and pieces to it too, and you can mess up both. But I learned a lot of the real estate business just going into bigger pockets, and there's so many sub segments. You may not even decide to do on to to glamping. You might go into a boutique hotel. You might go into an actual hotel space. You might go into a vacation rental in a different part of, the country, or even maybe midterm rentals where you're looking into, putting a place in a really nice area that's near hospitals, or like specific destinations that people go for, a month plus. The thing I love about real estate is there's so many different segments you can do. Glamping really did kind of just take my heart, just because of I always wanted to provide the hospitality section, so hotels and things like that were towards me. And then I just love nature. Like, I really genuinely do. Like, going out to my site is one of the most like relieving things. Even when I'm going out there, had a major plumbing leak last week. It still was like so much better than being in Houston. And I love Houston to death. I love Houston, but man, there's a lot of different ways I wouldn't have found out these creative niches without like doing my research onto like Bigger Pockets, watching a lot of people, like, I learned a lot of just about how money can move too, and like how you can talk to people. I don't want to say I'm not a salesy person. That's why I don't even use my real estate license much, but learning sales tactics is vital for anybody trying to run a business, because there's things like discount codes and how to do marketing and all these things like that. There's so many different aspects, and it seems overwhelming at first, but you got to just kind of start slowly, and don't wait too long, because getting into the fire definitely like helps you get going. But at the same time, you don't just need to jump in, because you'll make a bad investment you'll make a bad investment to begin with, and then you'll probably not get that confidence to like restart. So it's a fine line between being too educated, or like overly educated, and being undereducated. But I would just, without a doubt, doing all the research up front is something that really saved me from making a bad decision on how I did my site, what structure I was going to do. I definitely spent more money than I thought I was, but in my years of flipping houses,
as we all do,
this was not bad compared to what most of the time happens with like flipping houses. So this one actually, I didn't go over budget much, and I'm proud of myself for that. So
that's awesome. Garrett, you had so many great little tidbits in there. The part that you said about, we have a very similar education background in this. Relied on Bigger Pockets to start understanding it. For me, it started with Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yeah. I come from a marketing standpoint, and I learned, again, everything off of YouTube University. I praise YouTube University. The amount of free knowledge there is, and the amount of free knowledge that people are wanting just to give you is pretty remarkable. That space, and just being able to e-learning in general, I think is incredible. And then understanding how because my financial literacy was terrible. I would make money, and then through the marketing agency, and then I would just spend the money. And I would live off that. And I was like, I'm going to do this till the day I die. I'm going to be trading my time for money. And I was like, I need to develop assets that then are able to work and have my money continue to work. So that base knowledge and the base understanding helped me a lot. And then once I had that base fundamental of financial literacy, using Bigger Pockets, using people like Kai Andrews and Rob Bill, and the culmination of that. I love how you mentioned that it's not just one avenue. It's the culmination of material that you're going to consume, and the bit about there's so many subsections of this asset class and real estate in general. It was so I couldn't have said it better. Glamping is such a specific asset class in the overall real estate investments that you're not going to get the large appreciation. You're not going to get the leverage like you are going to in a traditional real estate. You're not going to get, you can depreciate, but not in the sense of a 14-plex like traditional real estate. But it cash flows better than any other asset class in real estate investments. So I do think that it's, I loved your part on the culmination of education that you were able to get from, and that it's a continuous thing. I look at my education, and that's why I love doing podcasts like this, because you talk to other people and you get tidbits from these different podcast episodes that I'm like, I never thought of that. Like, that's such a great tidbit.
Yeah.
Okay, so you learned your education. That's the first part. And then talk to me about the market. How did you get into Texas? You're obviously from Houston, so choosing the market that's an hour away. Did you know about the market before? Tell me about how kind of you learned about it.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to stay kind of close to Houston, especially for my first site, just because I didn't want to. I knew I was going to use the owner occupied loan too, so this was going to technically be my house. So I didn't want to be far from a lot of my more typical work, and I wanted to be in the area because I didn't know what I was getting into fully. I grew up going to Lake Livingston, which is the second largest lake in Texas, but I actually feel like there's something that people don't talk about because there's the Lake Conroe, which is not far from Houston, which is kind of like the lake that a lot of people go to. But growing up to and going to Lake Livingston, because my dad used to take trips out there, they have a lot of fishing, all types of things. I knew that that was a monument that people could go to, have something relaxing that was nearby, and then we also have a national forest that was also near this same type of area. So I knew these were two types of attractions, and people always, especially like the glamping people that have been doing this for years, and they made good valid points that you got to you can't just go put it out in completely middle of nowhere. So because it even now, like you think you build the perfect property where it's like, guests will have so much to do, they'll be so entertained, and they'll be so happy to just not be doing anything, which is true. But when they have options, and we've even built like small itineraries for people, like, hey, you're staying Friday through Sunday. On Saturday, you should you should call these people. They do fishing tours. You can go out and do a fishing tour. This is a great restaurant to go to lunch for after. Then
I need a buzzer every time you say something just gold.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start.
I need to get you one. I used to have one for one of
flipping
my other YouTube channel. I used to have one. I used to buzz it.
I'm just gonna bang this piece of tape or
gavel.
something. I mean, that's amazing. Continue. I didn't want to cut you off. But
No, you're good.
This is gold right here.
But this has worked, and then we'll say, hey, go hike the national forest after this. It's 10 minutes away. Then you can go get dinner here, or like, what do you want to do? There's wineries over here. There's breweries, this far away. Nothing is, being out that far, nothing is really close, but everything is within 20, 30 minutes still. So that was some of the main things I wanted when I was looking was I wanted it, and Lake Livingston is massive, right? It's super big. I knew, and I started looking at places. I was looking at the top of the lake because I was like, oh, I can get cheaper places up there. But that ended up being like a 2.5 hour drive versus my 1 hour drive because after looking at so many places, I knew that I needed to be on the south side of the lake. And just because this is just how I knew driving every single day, 2.5 hours or every few days. And when you have to go check it, that becomes way more painstaking for you to go check on it. And we've had big issues not big issues, but like plumbing leaks and small things like that it's been very accessible to me to get up there for an hour. So one of my big pieces of criteria after I was looking forever was knowing that I needed to be within about an hour of my drive. I knew I wanted to be very close to the lake and very close to the national forest. But you can't really necessarily get on the lake because most of them have pretty much 99% of the lake has an HOA, like different HOAs, and they're not going to allow you to build these types of unique structures.
Of course.
And then the other really big criteria was obviously price range. In looking in that market, so Lake Conroe kind of took me out of my price range. They were more in the to get 10 plus acres with a house on it. That's pretty decent. You're going to probably be in like $1 million range. And my area was more in the $500,000 to $700,000 range. So the price range matters a lot too in the areas you're looking at for what you can actually do. And then and then the competition was the kind of the last piece that nobody in that area, especially even now, let me knock on wood, but nobody still and for some reason Houston is the third largest city in the country, but we have no major glamping sites that like this particularly, especially none that are dedicated to couples. There's by Lake Conroe, there's a place that has like 19 shipping containers on like 7 acres, which is dedicated to more families and things like that. But we wanted to do more private, luxury, romantic style getaways, girls trips. And we looked in the market using Airbnb and AirDNA and all that, and didn't see the competition and knew we could beat a lot of people to market. And we're by tons of major cities. We're an hour from Houston. We're 3 hours from Austin. We're 3 hours from Dallas. We're by a lot of, we thought about, like we could have plopped it anywhere. We could have went further East Texas and got a really cheap piece of land. There's big lakes out there, but nobody there's just that would have been 3-4 hours from Houston, 5-6 hours from Dallas. You start to get a little too far from all your major cities that I feel like it's just going to be really hard to draw people in unless you just have a just show-stopping, unique, one-of-a-kind place, which is that's tough sometimes to do that. Find a waterfall over a mountain, like
Yep,
there's not a ton
absolutely.
of them out there that you can buy.
Well, I call it the 60-30-10 rule. 60 minutes from the major city, 30 minutes from a final destination. Because, like you said, if you throw it up in Antarctica, people aren't going to drive to your glamp site for your glamp site. But people would love to stay at your glamp site if they're already visiting the lake, if they're already visiting the national forest. So 30 minutes from their final destination and then 10 minutes from civilization. So they want to know that people are around them, but they don't want to be next to the people.
Yeah.
So that's what we've found that has been successful. I call it the 60-30-10 rule because we found that that's like the most ideal property. And yours...
My hit's exactly that.
Exactly that.
Mine's like 60 minutes from Houston, 30 minutes from the lake, or less than 30 minutes, but in there, and then 10 minutes from any like major store or anything like that. That's exactly what it was. So that's hilarious.
I mean, that's like the perfect ideal. That's what we found. This perfect ideal property.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you've hit that, that's remarkable.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's very
remarkable.
true. It has definitely helped a lot.
One little pro tip that we do. We'll get into it later. But are you on Airbnb? Or how are most of your reservations?
Honestly, most of mine are direct bookings. 70% direct booking. Yep.
That's incredible.
We've been killing it with our direct bookings.
We are mostly on Airbnb, and we found a little hack on how to get emails from Airbnb to our own software, so that we're actually targeting the actual user. But we do it through our guest book, which is what you mentioned, or our itinerary book. So we have the same thing, an itinerary,
Oh, nice.
2-day stay. This is what you have to see at the Grand Canyon. 1-day stay. These are the go-to trails, where to watch the best sunrise, etc. We have the same thing, but we do it, and we do it as like, here's a free itinerary, but it's really to get people's emails. So
Nice.
that's what reminded me of what you're doing. We
Nice.
get into that later.
Getting the real email is one of the hardest things, but I do that with my internet. They have to use their email to get the internet.
Okay.
There's
That's a great one.
Stayfi does that. It's like a little company, and I've used that email list quite a bit. I had quite a few rebookings already.
See, that's incredible. Yeah, and then being able to retarget that those emails through Instagram ads and those types of ads.
Yep. No, that's perfect. That's a good tip.
Okay, so location, 60-30-10 rule, phenomenal. I'm literally like, I'm geeking out because these are
we were synced up. I knew it.
You're dropping gold after gold over here. Next, I want to talk about how you found. Now, you land hacked this, which is phenomenal. And I think that land hacking is another great trick that I originally learned from Kai Andrews. And I think what you were able to do with buying an original home, and I want you to tell me all about this, but
Sure.
Buying an original home and then being able to build your sub properties and your other cash flowing assets along that property that does appraise, because you will have, your home does appraise and is worth a certain amount of money. You can add more money into renovations, which then increases the ARV. And so walk me through that. Walk me through how you found the specific lot. Is 12 acres?
Yep, 12 acres.
Walk me through how you found the 12 acres and then kind of how you came up with, okay, 12 acres, these are the units, this is where I want to put the units, this is how I'm going to increase the money coming into that property.
So taking it slow is definitely one of the things that actually really, really worked in my favor, because I do have my real estate license, and that made it a lot easier because I could just drive up there 45 minutes or whatever, book a bunch of properties and just go around and look at them through the day. And even if I didn't necessarily like, oh yeah, I know this is going to be the one, it really helped me start to see that, okay, because at first I was like, oh, maybe I'll just do 5 acres. I wasn't really sure of what I wanted. I kind of just had an idea in my head, and I kind of was just like, okay, let me just go look at a few and see. I thought 5 acres would be enough, and I started looking at some 5-acre properties that were, a little cheaper. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. But as I start to like envision it, and I'm like, because I went also and I stayed at a few glamping sites prior to this too to get a feel. There's some in Austin.
I love that.
There's quite a few in Austin, so it wasn't too far. I went and stayed actually in Sedona, Arizona. I stayed in one in a geodome out there. A couple other, just because I wanted to get like the feel for like, hey, this place has 20 domes on 10 acres. How does that feel? This place has
How
one
does that
dome
feel? Yep.
on 5 acres, like and just because I knew I didn't want I wanted I wanted to get as high of a daily rate as I could on these places, and I knew that
Absolutely.
the only way to do that was to really hit that seclusion, privacy, kind of like add as many private amenities as you can. The thing that personally bothered me was like having to share amenities, share bathrooms,
Yep.
share things like that, and it was you could definitely cram more on there, but that wasn't the experience I wanted to provide just from staying at a few places. So
Garrett, that's another gold nugget right there. I call it hands-on education to in-classroom education.
yep,
Obviously, the bigger pockets, the Rob built, the Kai Andrews, watching
yep,
YouTube University. That's all the in-classroom, right? But it's so valuable to stay at a glamp site, to stay at a property, to find your taste.
yep,
Because at the end of the day, if you like it, then there's a high probability that
yep,
other people will like it as well. So
yep,
I think that is such a beautiful golden nugget there, is that you stayed at other properties, you
yep.
found what you liked, and then you just duplicated and replicated what you liked through mimicry and then added your own little taste to it.
Yep.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
No,
but that is
no,
such
it's
so
perfect
golden right there.
because it was super valuable though because it made me realize that what type of structures I didn't personally want because some people love shipping containers. I personally don't. I've stayed in a couple shipping containers. That's my personal opinion. I know people that kill it with shipping containers, but there's different flavors for every person, and I wouldn't have known that if I wouldn't have. I stayed at a few smaller glamping sites, with the canvas tents, and I was like, okay, I didn't really like this, and I would have never known that because just from me hearing some of this and be like, oh, I could put 10 tents on 2 acres and kill it for sure. But I wouldn't have known once I went to a few of these sites. I was like, actually, no. I was like, this is not the way I want to do it because I was like, I don't like this, and so why would I want other people to stay here? I just it was the
Yep.
same like you said, like there's probably some kind of percentage out there that likes similar things as you, or to a basis of it, or at least the idea of it. So once I stayed at a few places, I went and saw tons of places around the lake and made a couple offers. They were a little lower than that I don't want to say than they should be because it's real estate, everything's negotiable, but they were kind of like lower ball offers basically. But I knew like the only way the place would work would to be at this type of number. But I also was just getting a feel for the market too. Like I hadn't fell in love with anything, and but me seeing as many properties as I could made it easy to know what I didn't really want and staying in other places. This is definitely a luxury I had because I have my license, and I'm sure I don't, you probably can find if you have a good realtor or anything like that, and they really understand your vision, and you're able to tell them up front, like, hey, I'm probably gonna look at quite a few properties because I still don't really know this, and then
Mm-hmm.
you might be in good grace with them. But realtors, I've not me personally, just because I haven't been doing, I don't really do it much, but they'll get if they go see 3 houses and you're not making offers, sometimes they're like, like they feel like you're wasting your time. And I probably saw, I don't know, 50 houses before I even decided like, oh, okay, this is what I want, this is the price range I need, and this is how I was able to figure it out. But it was just on the MLS. It'd been on the MLS for a while. It was during the COVID era when everything was still rocking and booming, but for some reason, this place was one of the few that wasn't selling. I know for quite a few reasons why. There's a neighbor that has probably that you can't see, but he's kind of at the front of the property, and he's just got these old cars, and like up there, people would go over there and just kind of get turned off by it. And we
Mm-hmm.
slapped a $3,000 fence and put some ivy over it, and
Called it a day.
yeah, and it's a day. So we saw the creative vision for what we want, and I would walk the properties and just a lot of my research, and even it's been an ever changing thing because I mean our ideas like we've had our ideas since day one, and now we're at day whatever, and it's kind of the same, but it's still like completely different to where we're at. Like our next property that's launching in a couple months, we'd never thought about this a year ago. But it's just kind of how things work out as we've been doing it for a while and took it slow. So a lot of these things it's starting to really progress now. That's why we were able to hit the ground running so much. But I would say this is definitely something that you just want to take your time with, see as many places as you can, stay at a few places, keep your education going, and really start to crunch some of these numbers. Like there's tons of spreadsheets, and different people have downloadable spreadsheets. You can type some numbers in. You can go into Airbnb and see what the competition is in these areas. You can look at their calendars and I used to look at calendars, and because it's hard to know like how much they were booked before, but I would go look at
Absolutely.
how many reviews they got. And it's a
It's a
little
good one.
it's a little iffy, but a lot
Yeah.
of times if they have a ton of reviews and each month they're getting 7, 8 reviews, because I don't know what my review rate's pretty high because I always ask for a review.
Yeah.
But I'd say probably 50% of the time people leave reviews, maybe just like a rough estimate. I'm sure it's more scientific number out there, but
Yeah, I
if you
mean, we found the same thing. It's only about we don't get a lot of reviews. I do something very similar. I look at their high and lows on AirDNA,
yeah
and then I will then calculate. I'll go to a listing that I would be like, yeah, I would do something similar to that, and then I would see
yeah
how many reservations they have for that month,
yeah
based off of the highs and lows of AirDNA, and then I can kind of roughly
all of those.
calculate how much it is. Yeah, yeah.
I would get
Very
AirDNA.
similar technique there.
I'd get AirDNA numbers, and AirDNA is a little shaky sometimes too, especially during COVID. It was
Mm-hmm.
towards the end of it because everybody had such high numbers. You're looking at a place and you're like, dude, I can buy this little place over here, and it's gonna make me 90, especially in a smaller town for me, because it would take we're right by the lake, and so houses on the lake go for 7 or 800 a night. And there may be 2 or 3 bedrooms, but then the ones that are 10, 15 minutes off, it's a totally different thing. But AirDNA would like scope it all together.
All in together, yeah.
So I would go into Airbnb and like double check it, even though AirDNA was a good source of data for sure. And then I would getting onto Airbnb and double checking it really started to give me an idea of like, okay, like this area really, these type of homes really do well, and obviously, you have your typical cabins, and these do okay, but there's a couple unique stays like over here, and they're outperforming these by a lot. And I would just crunch numbers that way, and then just trust my gut at the same time. I've made a few mistakes here and there for sure, but in the end, I got started and I've learned a lot, and I will not make those mistakes ever again, and will only
Mm-hmm.
keep growing from here now. So I made mistakes building my dome, but next time I build a dome, I'm never making any of those mistakes.
Yeah,
I'm
yep.
saving 20,000 next time. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
part of the journey. So I've definitely been appreciative of it.
That's awesome, man. I mean, from someone who's been doing this for about a year and a half now, everything you're saying, I'm like, that's it, that's it. He's right, he's right. It's awesome. So walk me through. Did you know that you were gonna do a geodesic dome? Geodesic dome, correct?
Yes, that was the first one.
You knew
Yep.
you were gonna do a geodesic dome on this piece of property,
Yep.
and so the house didn't really matter that much to you.
No, it did, because I knew it was going to be I was going to make it an Airbnb too. I was going to live in it
Okay,
for a year, so I wanted the house to be nice, but I also wanted to be able to add, force some
add
value
value, of course.
to it,
Yeah, yeah.
and we redid a bathroom, we changed, some carpet to flooring. We're still working on it as we do it, but upgrading the backyard and things like that. But I also wanted to make sure they were completely separate. So the house sits at the front of the property. We had the geodome kind of in the middle, and we also always plan to have our biggest and baddest site at the back of the property that sits on top of the creek,
And
and
that's the new one, right?
and that's the new one that we're working on now. So we wanted
So
to build up the
badass. I saw the
capital.
renderings.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. So we're
Yeah, they're
excited. So
badass, dude.
thanks, man. So yeah, we're gonna keep adding that on, but we knew that we didn't want to go big like all the way on our first site, and because if we built a 24-foot dome. I always get that confused with the meters and all that.
Hmm.
24-foot dome wide, and at first we were like, oh, maybe we'll do the 30-foot one, and we'll make it enough for 4 to 6 people. And I sat there and I thought about it. I was like, that's probably double the cost, at least materials and everything else, from that first dome, and it's going to double all our mistakes too. And I'm so glad we didn't, because any mistake we
Hmm.
made with a much bigger dome would have cost us even more. So
Of
we
course.
started kind of small, and I could build a big dome in my sleep now because I know everything about it. But that first one, if I would have built a much bigger dome, we would have not lost money, but we would have went over budget even more, because it's the
Yeah.
bigger you build and the crazier you build, the more it just gets like exacerbated when you start messing up a couple things, which will happen. So
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So then, geodesic dome. Before you bought the property, did you know you wanted to do that?
I
And
was
then
pretty
what
sure
kind of
about that. I was
what
pretty
drew
sure
you
about that.
to that?
Staying in places definitely was like, hey, these are, and I kind of have a little bit of a marketing background and things too, and I knew that one of the things about the dome is that in marketing, the better the product is, the easier it is to market. And I knew seeing a picture of a really dope dome basically is like it's more stopping than a lot of other structures. There's definitely like you can build some crazy structures, but for some reason the dome to me it just based off of cost as well too included, not
Yep.
like the dome was just like, man, this looks really cool. Like I don't see anything like that, especially in my area. Like and it has worked because it has been like our Facebook ads have killed it because it's just so show stopping.
Yeah. Alex Hermosi says people sell because they don't know how to market, and people market because they don't know how to build a product.
No.
And I think that having that geodesic dome is such a phenomenal product that it's just, you don't have to sell. You don't have
Yeah,
to market.
absolutely.
People stay in it, they refer their friends,
Yep.
which is compounding. And the fact that you can have such a phenomenal product, and I mean, just from your photos, that view of the lake, that deck that it sits on, who you look at it and you're like, yep, I'm in. I don't care. Take all my money. You know that
Yeah.
one meme where they're like, take all my money? That's literally
That's what we
that's
hope.
literally the feeling I get when I see your property. So you've
Thank
done
you,
a
thank you.
phenomenal job at that
Appreciate it.
structure. Now the hard parts, right? Talk to me about utilities, because I
Yeah.
know your home has utilities.
Yep.
And how far is your home to the geodesic dome?
So that was one thing Kai Andrews really preached a lot, and he was really monument or instrumental in a lot of the things I was doing too, because he had some amazing ideas for how to structure these type of things. And one thing he always talked about was finding a place with utilities already on it, and because getting electric back to places, you could find an amazing view, an amazing property, and then getting the utilities back to a place could be, you could be in six figures by the time you even blink with some places.
It's a nightmare.
So I was lucky enough to, buy the house. It has utilities. It has its own septic and it has its own well. So, and that's two different things that I had to learn. I knew about wells a good bit just from being in the country, but septic was still a little new to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that having the ability to even get water over there, and I started getting some quotes from some people just to give me an idea of like, okay, this is how much a septic may cost. Before I even had the property, I would call people and say, hey, how much is a septic for a tiny house? I always say tiny house just because you say geodome. These people are
perfect.
like, what? I
People
just
like,
say, hey,
what?
how much is it for this and for a tiny home? And they would give me like, oh, this is a ballpark. And so I had a
How much did they ballpark you at?
usually it was about $10,000 for the septic, and then it was about $15,000 for the well. But by the grace of the glamping gods, I came in at 80. Well, I was 8,500 for my septic, but I was able to tie in my next site, which is how I'm saving a lot of money, into the septic. So I paid 9,500 for an install, but now all I have to do is add I can't remember what they call it, some type of pump that sends the septic back from my new place, which is about 400 feet away from the dome, or not 400 feet, 400 yards, sorry. And it's only going to be another couple thousand. But putting a septic in each place would have been probably 20,000 versus me thinking of head. That was one really good thing I did. That was one non-mistake I made is I thought ahead too. I said I knew that, all right, we put the dome here. We're going to add this other structure at the back. We'll start at the dome, but in the middle of the property. It's probably 500 yards maybe from the house or anything, but I drilled a whole new well and septic. So they just had to run the electric lines, which cost me $5,000 and $3,000 in tree removal. They had to cut some.
Oh my goodness.
They had to cut some overhead. They didn't
So
have.
two grand in running power. That's a steal.
Yeah, when I wasn't bad, but it didn't have to come very far. That was the
Yeah.
thing. And I would have got underground transmitter, but they were out by the company. In the area, they only have one electric company. It's a co-op, so you only get one choice. And they ran out of underground transmitters, so
It's
I
a
had
hell
to
of
get
a way
the
to
overhead.
monopolize a market right there.
Oh yeah, they run monopoly over there. It's funny. So they've been cool though. I was able to get an underground transmitter for my next property. Luckily, we just got it installed. But me putting the dome in the middle of the property cut my upfront cost out tremendously. Because if I would just be like, oh, I'm going straight to the back of the property, which is the best part and all this, I would have had to put up front before I have any cash flow. I didn't have any of these places running. Now we're we're probably cash flowing at least 6,000 or 7,000 a month and making 10 to 11 every month.
That's
And
incredible.
we didn't have any of that cash flow. We would have had to put up, double in our utilities. But because we went to the middle of the property first and kind of just made our way back and kind of aligned it, and we planned on having that extra site. We were able to save money on septic because we tied in our first
Yep.
property with our other one. We put the one well in, and they quoted me at 15,000. I ended up getting it for 11 because they didn't have to drill as far, which is great. And then I'll be able to
Phenomenal.
tie in that well. I'll be able to just trench it out. My plumber will, plumb lines all the way to, 500 yards, and it's probably going to be about $5,000 to do that, which is better than a whole nother well for $12,000 to $13,000. And even when you drill a well, there's not a guarantee you're going to hit water, and you still got to pay.
Yep.
So that would be
Garrett,
that'd
this
be
is
the worst
just,
one.
it's so amazing. These nuggets right here. So I think what is the best thing that you've done from an outside third party perspective is doing that first unit close by, which allowed you to gain the knowledge and experience and the expertise in the utilities. Because
And the
that's
road.
not,
I forgot about the road too. The road
oh
costs
my,
so much to put in. So that
yep,
was another reason why putting it in the middle was a great idea. But sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I just think that it's so, because people are like, yeah, it's going to be $2,000 to put in a geodesic dome, and I'm going to make $8,000 a month.
Yeah.
It's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah.
People don't think about the utilities. People don't
Oh
think
no.
about the septic, the power, the water. The road
Yeah.
infrastructure is in
Absolutely.
itself is brutal.
Yeah.
And I think it's phenomenal that you were able to work through those hurdles. In Arizona, $40,000 for a septic unit. 12 inches below, we're pure rock. So we have to.
Dang.
It perks as an alternative septic unit, which is, and it's crazy, man. So I think that
Wow.
what
Ooh.
you've done is part of that is the greatest investment would be that land, that $12,000 for a well. That so you got perfectly running water coming in and out at all times. Then you got power that you could tap into already from the main house. We don't have power. We're all off grid. So we're power through solar panels is the only way you're turning
Yeah.
on power. So only one of our units handles AC. So the rest of our units have no AC, and we tell our guests it's 100 degrees. We have no AC, so this might not be the best month
Yeah.
to stay with us. And because people don't understand just how much an air conditioning unit pulls power-wise,
Absolutely.
and people are used to just flipping on a switch and you get
Yeah.
instant power. The dealing with off-grid, and I think it's so amazing to hear a story that now, here's a question. While you were in escrow on the property, did you know that that you were going to be able to do a septic unit there, that you were going to tie in power from the main house, that you were going to do a well? Was that any part of your due diligence, or was it just a lucky coin that you were able to flip?
So did I 100% know? No, because you never know what could come up. But I had a strong inclination that it would be no issue because prior to even finding, because there's two counties I was looking at, and this goes back to me being a realtor, honestly. Like I that is one, I don't use it much, and I do pay some fees every year just to do it. But and I mean, I made a commission off this, which is great. But I've learned
You
a
paid
lot
yourself,
from it.
huh?
I paid myself actually, so it was wonderful. So I did know a lot of these things before. So like I was able to, and anybody can do this too though. It wasn't just because I'm a realtor, but I just knew a lot about calling people about permits and septics and other things. I just do this for clients a lot. Not necessarily this, but I've had clients build on land, and I have a general knowledge of just like what some of the things take, even though I don't necessarily call for quotes for people. That's why I was like I didn't know how much the quotes were going to be, although I knew somewhat, but I would call some of these counties before though. I would call contractors and start telling them my idea, and then if they would kind of scoff at it or be like, "What?" Then I'd be like, "Okay, this is not the right person for me." But anybody that would be like, "Oh yeah, like we can do that in our sleep," like build a geodome. Of course, we can build we build mansions or something. Like I was
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
find somebody that just had that confidence because there was nobody that had built anything like this in the area.
The
And
yes
even
people. I mean, you're going to run in that with everything you do. Some people
100%.
say no, it's impossible, and some people say, well, let's figure out how it's possible. That's how we attack our county, and
Yeah.
we just go, hey, look, this is what we want to do. I want to comply. I want to be fully on board with what you guys and the regulations you have. Let's walk through how this is possible, not if it's possible. So
Yep.
that's and I think that's a great little piece right there.
That's the exact approach I took, honestly, because I started calling some areas, calling contractors. I was just calling people to get a feel for how they were going to react to it, and I would ask the contractors too, especially the ones that I kind of liked, just give them a idea what's going on. I'd be like, hey, well, from your experience, like, is Polk, I don't want to say the counties out here, but is this county better than this county? And, or like just dealing with them and, like, how does that work? And they would be like, oh, you should go to this county because they're like, the permitting part is just way easier to deal with. Like that one over there, they're going to like give you the runaround and like make you do this and cross this line and do this. And the other county, like they're not, they're going to be way more relaxed. I'll put it that way, without, without going into full convos, but call around. And then I would call the counties myself too. That was the thing. I called the permitting departments, or I'd email them. Emailing is better. Calling and emailing, I would do a little both, but emailing I liked because some of these places, like talking to them on the phone, they're just gonna be like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So I would send them an email with like, pictures and like kind of like, hey, this is what I'm just like you. Like, I want to fully comply. Like, this is what I want to do. What are y'all's thoughts? And they're not gonna be like, yes, absolutely. Like, no county's gonna do that. But if they're like, let's talk about it. Or if they're like, no, you're gonna know from those answers. If they're like, oh yeah, no, we can probably figure that out, or then you're probably in a good county. They're not gonna be able to give you a yes because they have to see a lot of things. I had to,
of course,
I got commercial permits for each of my sites. I had to get my septic drawings. I had to, do a site map for one of like just different things. They every county's different to what they're gonna ask. But if they're willing to like hear you out and be like,
willing
hey,
to play ball, that's the biggest
that's
thing.
all
It's
you
like,
need.
look, I want to comply. I want to do this correctly. But and we got shut down. I'm not sure if you saw that video, but we got shut down, and code enforcement came by, and I was like, look, first off, I want to apologize. Second off, I want to comply. I don't know the rules. I want to, one, educate myself in your guys' jurisdictions and in your laws. And then two, and then three, I want to apply those rules in what I want to do and work with me here. And so I think that counties, they want the money. They're a business and they don't want to lose their jobs. So if you just understand those two things, that they want your money and they don't want to lose their jobs, that you can work with them. Hey, look, I don't want to break rules. I want to follow the guidelines. I want you to tell me what I need to do, and then I will do whatever you need me to do. Talk to them like a normal person, and tip 9 times out of 10, you'll be all set.
And depending on who you're talking to as well, one tip that I've told a lot of people that worked tremendously for me, especially I've had multiple crazy sites already permitted going forward that we have, was tell them how you're going to help them too. Like, don't just make it about this is me, this is me, this is me. I was talking about, hey, I'm employing local contractors. I'm employing local handy people. I'm employing local cleaners. I'm employing I'm going to local restaurants.
Nugget right there.
I'm doing I'm bringing you hotel occupancy taxes. I'm paying them every month.
Yeah.
We are one of the most viral sites right now in Texas, and we're in your city. That I don't say this verbatim, but it's like, y'all don't got a lot going on. Like, I'm bringing something to it. Like, this is
we're full-time employing. That's what we tell them.
Yeah.
We're full-time employing 8 people that work for us
all the
time, that are locals that don't have jobs, and they're now working for us. And we send all of our out-of-state, out-of-country tourism to local businesses.
Yep.
In our itinerary, we say you have to go to this restaurant. You have to go see these rocks. Yep. Arizona's big with rocks, so you have to go check out this rock store. Like, the amount of plus sides there is to the glamping industry. What you just talked on, hiring local contractors, working with small businesses, is so beneficial to them as well as a county. That it's and they don't know that. So having that two-way communication with them is so vital, and I love that little bit there. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, it was I agree with you fully. You were just kind of piggybacking what you were saying, because that was getting my first site wasn't hard to get permitted. My second and third sites that I've gotten permitted in the works now were much harder for different reasons, for different septic being one of the big drawbacks for different reasons. But once I really started going talking about hey, I don't know if y'all realize, but this is also really good for the county too. There's this, and this. And most of the time when you're building these glamping sites, it's in places that rely on this type of tourism anyways, because they're not short-term rentals have been there forever, way before Airbnb in a lot of these places. And you're just trying to bring that next wave to it, and you're going to pay your taxes and all, they're going to get their cut, that's the thing I kind of reiterate to them. And it worked great in my favor, because they really just honestly, after I employed a local architect to help with something. It was just like,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, everybody's getting work off of me right now. Like,
Yeah.
just get off my back.
I'm paying everyone over here.
Let me work right here. And then they've been really cool since then, though. I have a good relationship with my county, and I do like them a lot. So
That's awesome. A little tidbit. You mentioned about calling an email. We do the same thing. We communicate via email, via phone calls. When I started, I used to make up new names every time I called because they were stupid questions. And I was like, I can't have these people thinking that it's me the entire time. So I used to hey, this is John. I got a question. Are tiny homes allowed? Like, if it's above 200 square feet, are we allowed? Like,
she's like, did you just call me like 2 seconds? Like, no, it's not me.
No, this is Jeff. So I used to make up a bunch of different names because I didn't want to know that it's me. But yeah, once you're an email, you can't really fake that. So
but then you got proof of what they said too.
No, I know. So I chose my email questions very concisely, and then I chose my phone questions more lucidly. But
they're like, man, we're getting a lot of glamping inquiries today. And I'm like, dang, that's crazy, man. This is getting real hot around here.
It's just the same person calling like 14 times.
That's great.
Amazing. Okay, great. So then, utilities. I mean, that's such a hard thing to tackle. It's amazing that you were able to tackle that.
Yeah.
You were able to do, was it an FHA loan? Second home
conventional loan. I sold my primary home, and I made this my primary owner occupied home. Like, my girlfriend lives in Houston, my mom lives in Houston, so anytime I need to come back, I would
of course
do it. But I still wasn't super far in the end. A lot of people commute an hour and a half to Houston work every day. So
but you were only 5% down.
Yep.
That's amazing. And then were you able to fund, how did you fund the first geodesic home?
So that was the whole reason that I could do 5% down, because I had to pay that all cash pretty much. I financed some things on credit cards and other things like that, and my business partner put in a little money, but we together, because I sold my condo and I had upgraded it and sold it at the peak of COVID time, which was great. I made a killing on that part, so that helped a lot too in finances. But being able to have that low down payment option, if I would have had to put, I think they're doing second home loans on, like, I think they're 15% now, and at the time they might have been 10%. But if I had put 15 to 20% down on this place, it would have cash strapped me a lot. And building some of these, I would have probably had to go to maybe a much smaller structure. I don't know, figure some other thing, or smaller house. I don't know. A few things I would have figured out differently, but being able to do that 5% down really helped me have the cash to work on the geodome and upgrade the house some while I lived in it. And kind of just took it as that came. But doing that option was definitely the best one for me. Because financing land is so hard by itself. You have to have either cash, or
it's almost impossible.
It's almost impossible besides just buying it with cash. Like, you could probably get a loan, but you're still going to put probably 50-60% down or something on it. Like, we
seller finance all of our raw land just because
it's very smart.
If we can't buy it in cash, that's the only raw land they can't appraise. They can't get loans on it because their ability to resell raw land is so hard.
Yeah, it's going to take them
banks
years.
Don't want to do it.
Yeah. I hate listing raw land as a realtor because I know it's going to sell. It's probably going to sell in like 5 years. Like, it's just if you're selling it just regular cash, conventional or something like that. So I knew that getting the house hacking, that made it extremely easy for me to actually get into a place. And after it was, I don't want to say it was an easy process because it wasn't, but I've bought a few homes and lived in them. I buy them and live and flip in them basically, or that's what I used to do in Houston more. And then I would live in them for a year or two, usually 2 years, so I don't have to pay the capital gains taxes, fix them up, and then sell them and then go to the next one. So it was kind of a relatively same process to me, but I just was also at the same time masterminding doing a glamp site. But having that cash reserve was huge for me. It definitely allowed a lot of decisions I made much easier.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Walk me through permitting. Is your main home permitted as a single family residence? And then,
sorry, go ahead.
And then you're set, and obviously those permits were handled before you bought the home. How did you permit your glamp sites?
So the house is single family, but the main thing that really was critical to me was making sure there was no HOA anywhere I bought. I bought unrestricted land that nobody, pretty much. Only the county has any say in what I do with the land. There's no place that no one's going to have a say in. But if you have an HOA,
even in Texas,
even in Texas, if you have an HOA, I'm pretty sure you're going to have an extremely hard time doing anything like this. So my advice is definitely find something unrestricted, because that will make, like, I was cattle land where particularly before I bought it, so I knew that anything with cattle, or the area I bought doesn't have mobile homes or anything, but usually if you see mobile homes in an area, you're probably in an area at least in the ballpark of something that's unrestricted. So once I got that, getting the commercial permit was, for the first site, was easy. I had buying this. This is what made it easy, because I say it's easy and it really wasn't. It was just me spending some money. I bought from Pacific Domes is how I bought my dome. But for $2,500, they'll send you the architecture plans that are stamped by a licensed engineer in Texas. Me having these plans, the permitting department guy he's good dude. I'm actually like pretty good friends with him now. He looks at it the first time and he goes, "We never get anything this detailed." Like, he's like, "This is above and beyond." Like because the plans are amazing from Pacific Domes. Pacific Domes is a little pricier than some places, but there's reasons why. They have amazing customer service, amazing track record. Their plan, like, just how they ran their operation was like, I'm very thankful for buying from them. But having those plans, I had the architecture plans, gave them to the permitting department. They looked at them. I showed them like what I was kind of doing. I had like I don't want to say it wasn't a professional site plan, but it was kind of like a rudimentary kind of site plan. And he was like, "Okay, that's fine." Like, they permitted it. They just sent a guy out there to check it out before we were even done. And I had licensed contractors who they knew. And so, like, it's a small community. So everybody kind of knows everybody up there. And they're like, "Okay, these guys are building it. Like, of course they're
these
good."
guys. Yeah, of
course. These guys build everything,
Yeah.
And it was a very smooth process. But then I got to, so then, the first, and all they want is, to tell them, if you're putting it as an Airbnb in the main house, you just tell them, and the taxes, you'll just pay your taxes, and they change the appraisal or the county taxes. It's a very simple process. Where I got hung up adding my next site, which I got commercially permitted a couple months ago, was the septic, which a lot of counties take serious, as you saw with $40,000 septics. Makes sense, because that could contaminate water. I'm by a creek. And so there's a lot, septic's leaking and being designed badly and having a lot of septic. That's a county's big worry, because it can contaminate the water, and
of course
that is huge in that kind of area.
Then they lose their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And get sued.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one another time. So yeah, they definitely don't want any septic leaks. So that was the other thing they were concerned about. And then the other thing that they were concerned about that nobody else has talked about, that Rob built, all these people like that, which is it was shocking to me, and I don't even know if you had this issue anywhere. But then they started bringing up ADA compliance, which makes sense. And I'm not against
ADA compliance. What does ADA stand for?
So, American Disability Act, which is every new structure, including hotels. This is a very gray area, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to get into this because I don't want to. This is like, it's kind of wild too, because like a lot of people, I mean, I even say myself included, like, the geodesic dome is not ADA compliant, and all new structures that are built commercially, and this is where the Airbnb hotel situation gets into a real gray area. They're supposed to be ADA compliant, and I don't want to get too far into it, but I am ADA compliant. It will be very soon. We're working on it because all you need is one structure ADA compliant. These are the rules. This is not me being a lawyer at all. You need one structure out of, I can't remember. There's numbers. I think it's like 10 to somewhere in there. They're online.
One out of
these amount. And the county was worried that I was having too many structures and something needed to be ADA compliant. And so they don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to get in trouble either, because it could be a
no
lawsuit.
one wants to get in trouble here.
Absolutely not. So we were able to. We're building another structure on the site too, and that's going to be ADA compliant, and it's in the works. And
that's awesome.
So that's going to take care of that. But there is another gray area that makes it real weird, because if you technically, you could be grandfathered in if you live on the property and it has less than 5 rooms, then you don't have to be ADA compliant. And there's all these little gray areas, and then they don't know if Airbnbs are. It's like I said,
they don't know if Airbnbs is technically commercially permitted structures.
Yes, it's a. And when I got in, I don't want to say got into, because that's not what happened. When I dove into, because this was a big holdup for my next site for a couple months. I had to get lawyers involved. Luckily, one of my friends has a friend that does camping site. He owns a lot of the Campgrounds of Americas, and he's a lawyer as well and does that type of law crazily. And his
It's a
suggestion
good
was,
person to have in your back pocket.
yeah, well, it was by grace of the glamping gods again, and I ended up getting a licensed architect in the area to stamp site plans to that were showing that we're building an ADA compliant site soon,
That's
which
amazing.
we are. But it was a big holdup for a couple months, and rightfully so. Like I get it, and I get where everybody was coming from. That's the thing about it is it's I get where everybody's coming from. There's a lot of sides in that kind of thing, but it was a pretty big holdup, and I never heard anybody else mention this before. And so when it happened to me, I was like, man.
Mm-hmm.
The more research I did into it, though, like it's something that I don't want to scare people or concern a lot of people.
It's something to start thinking
It's
of.
something to consider when you, especially if you're making a big operation, if you're going over a couple sites, or if you're in if once you get into that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 range, like you definitely are treading a risky water, because if you don't have one ADA compliant site on there and you have multiple on one piece of property, I've just heard some different things. So that would be my advice. If you're going that route and you don't have at least one ADA compliant, it's not hard to make an ADA compliant facility. I don't want to say it's easy, but it's not as hard as people think.
Yeah.
And there's a few things to it that you have to do, but most of the time it's pretty straightforward overall. A lot of the stairs are the main thing with what people struggle with building structures up and stuff. So,
Yep.
but yeah, it's just something that really was the hardest part of permitting other than that, my permitting journey was so easy because I called people, I did my research, I worked
love
with
that.
licensed people. But the ADA thing was a stickler, and I get it, but now that I know about it, it's something that I will always keep in mind when I'm building my next sites going forward, figuring out how I need to lay it out. And it's something that I think will come about more too, that people need to just kind of understand what exactly that is going on with that. And it could be a big issue for some people, especially because there's some people that seem lawsuit happy, like that will go around like,
Yep.
or there's like a lawyer in Florida that like went around to some places, and if they weren't ADA compliant, not to glamping sites, like restaurants and
But
places like that.
yeah.
And
That's wild.
wild, but that's the
I
world we live in.
I like GOTGG. Grace of the Glamping Gods.
Yeah.
I might get that just on a
Get a
placard.
T-shirt. Yeah,
GOTGG,
anytime
baby.
anytime we get a permit, that's all I'm just gonna just repeat a few times.
Just in Ted Lasso, when he has
Yeah.
the sign of believe,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put like a sign of GOTGG.
Good
That's
start.
awesome, dude. I mean, it's great to hear a story about easy permitting, because
Yep.
I feel like everyone's permitting is a
Yep.
nightmare. We permit ours as a single family residence, so it's like basically if you were going to live in a home. It's
Yeah.
not commercial at all. We have Airstreams, tiny homes on wheels, and RVs, and so we permit them as single family residence with a conditional use permit, and then we are
Nice.
able to run an Airbnb through that, because it's permits as a family residence.
Yeah.
Compared to like a geodesic dome is more of a commercial, obviously property, people aren't living there full time, so I understand how you would get that commercial permit. It's cool to hear a story about someone being able to permit something commercially with just doing it as the steps come along. I tell people all the time that starting a glamping business isn't hard, it's just a lot. There's just a lot of steps, and it's you won't know all the steps, but you just do the next thing that you have to do, and you just knock it off of your checklist and keep on going. That's awesome, man. That's so cool. We kind of talked about how you finance it, permitting, and then I call them the dream team, but it's the people that your handyman, your cleaners. Are you doing everything yourself? Do you have a team that you help with the turnovers, do wash the linens, that? And then how did you find those people?
Yeah, I absolutely. I have a great team behind me. I have a few cleaners. I have one head cleaner that kind of runs most of the operation, and she kind of has a few people under her. And then I have a couple handy people, and also I have a couple handy people that are very good, but I also have I have a good list of subcontractors in all the major fields too, because
So like a great plumber, a great electrician,
Yeah,
a great
all of that,
but then
'cause
handyman that can handle the landscaping if something goes awry.
Yep, correct. And then I do most of the management myself, just because it's kind of my alley. And I use property management software, and it's pretty easy for me.
We'll jump into that in a second, but how did you meet your cleaners? How did you meet your handyman?
Facebook groups are the best place that you can find
Yes.
anybody. People like I found 90% of my like people that have helped me build this site have been through Facebook groups, or Google was probably that other 10%. Just
Facebook
because when
groups
you
for
go,
people and Facebook Marketplace for things.
yep, absolutely. Because the thing about it is when you get out into some of these areas, especially like the more rural, that's always a tough word for me. They're like a lot of these people don't understand Google and they don't have like websites and things like that, but they damn sure have some references. You know what I'm saying? So you
Yeah.
go into some of these like local town Facebook groups, and these Facebook groups in these local towns are popping right there.
And they're hilarious,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
You want to get a good chuckle while you're drinking some whiskey is read through some of these
There's
Facebook groups.
Yes, absolutely. So with entertainment and the
Yep.
ability to find good workers on there is definitely a plus.
You
to
could
Facebook
hear
groups.
about the town gossip through these Facebook groups as well.
Yeah, no, that's what's
Some
funny
good
is
tea.
I use that as my TMZ basically now.
Yeah.
So I would just I would go look in the search bar, and I would also put in my own like, hey, I'm looking for cleaners, and then I would just try people out too, like at the same time, like try a couple here and there, and just like I'd live in the house and have them come clean it 1 week just to see. And be like, okay, this person was good. They showed up one time. Like, okay, cool. And then, because you really don't know, like, unless you've been doing this for a while or worked in hotels, or you really don't know what a good cleaner is until you have a
Yep.
good cleaner. You know, like
Yep.
you'll have. I had a couple
You have
people, and
to
I was like,
You have to see what's good and what's bad. Like
Yes.
I've had a bad cleaner and I've been like, that's a bad cleaner. And then
Yep.
you get a good cleaner and you're like, holy shit, that is a good cleaner. Because
absolutely.
most of the time you just get the average clean.
Yes, and
You only understand the spectrum once you get both sides.
yes, that was most of the time. I probably had 7 or 8 different people clean before I found my cleaner, and 6 out of them were average. You know, like and you couldn't really tell. You're like, okay, this is probably pretty good. Like I think this is cool. And then you got a bad one. You're like, okay, this is bad. Okay, and then you get a good one, and you're like, oh, this is like top notch. Okay, this is what I would
understand
pay
what a good
for.
cleaner-
Like, yeah. And then when I found her, she's amazing. Shout out to Emily. I'm sure she might watch this.
Shout out Emily, dude. Let's go, Emily.
So
Trying
yeah,
to move
she's
out to
amazing.
Arizona or what?
She's dedicated. She can find somebody for you and manage them. Maybe I don't know.
I'll take
But,
her up on that.
Yeah, but yeah, Facebook groups, man, they were instrumental. Absolutely, I found 90% of my dream team through Facebook groups.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have Joy and Mitch, and they're a married couple. Mitch does the handiwork, and
Nice.
Joy does the cleans. And dude, they are just phenomenal.
Nice.
When you find good people, it's just you just want to just say, okay, we're gonna stay friends forever. Like,
please don't leave me.
please don't ever leave me. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, she's like, I want a day off. I'm like, dude, take however many days
I'm
off.
the same way. I'm the same way.
You it's
you
it's
earned it.
amazing. Yep. Once you find the person, that's why they're a dream.
Yeah.
So then you manage all of yourself, which
Yep.
I do too. I think it's so interesting to have that ability to manage it all yourself because you really understand your business. This might be a little too esoteric, but I call it like a life force, right? Or a life energy. And it's the amount of personal energy that you put into something and an amount of aesthetic or feeling that you put into it. So I like personally property managing because when I communicate to guests, no one's going to communicate about the property the way I can communicate about the property because I built it.
Yep.
Because I was there from the ground up,
Yep.
because it's my baby, I'm able to communicate where everything is, what to do, how I feel about it, the experience that you get from it, that life force, that life energy is so... I thrive off of it, being able to talk because it gives me energy. It gives me like happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like as an investment, it pays off tenfold because guests get that other side of it. They get how hard you've worked on this property and how much it means to you. Therefore, they have the same appreciation going into it or during the experience or after the experience that you have while creating it. So talk to me a little bit about your management, what softwares you use, but then your ability to also connect to guests, because I think that's a big part of the management as well.
I agree completely. I definitely have nobody knows the place better than me, especially when you build something unique like this. Like this isn't just a stick built family home in the middle of a big city. You know, like this is something that is very very unique, and I'm one of the few people that can relay all the information that's needed at this time. Like, yeah, down the line, I would love to expand to going, but
Of
at the
course.
moment, at the moment, it is without a doubt like I've been able to answer so many questions for guests that in the second, if I had somebody managing it, they'd probably have to call me anyways to do it,
Exactly.
you to
You're
answer
gonna
it.
spend
So
the time regardless, so you
and
might as well
what am I
just.
paying you 20% to what? Call me? Like I can already do that right now. So so I use Logify. I tried a few different ones. I
Okay.
tried Guesty. There's a couple others I tried, but I ended up on Logify. I just like it. Haven't had any issues with it. There's
Love it.
tons of positives to it. It hooks up very well with a lot of all the platforms. It has good custom messaging. They have great guest service or customer service on their end anytime I do have an issue.
Hmm.
Um, but it allows me to instantly connect with guests. A lot of ways I can send. One way I've been able to really like touch in with guests too is through this property management software, because they have, and I'm sure a lot of them do too, where they have custom automatic messages where I'll set it like second a guest book, they get this message. 14 days before they get there, they get the guidebook. Like 7 days before they get another thing, 2 days before,
Hmm.
you get your code. One day before get your, here's your check-in if you need any last minute information. And I add attached YouTube videos too. Another great thing I did, that guests have commented on specifically.
This is a golden nugget. I already know where you're
It
going
is.
with this.
It's a
This
good
is
one.
good.
Is I
This is
took
good.
I
I
made,
already know. I'm
I already have
excited.
my own glamp YouTube, right? But I also I did a property tour video showing all the little ins and outs. This is how you start the hot tub, all this, and I made it public at the same time. I didn't give any information that I wouldn't want to give, like codes
Hmm.
or anything like that. But I made it public as well because I want other people to see, to be like, oh, this is, if they watch it, cool. But at the same time, it's a 15-minute walkthrough for my guest that the owner is walking them through all the intricacies of the property. Like, hey, like every once in a while, this door will get a little stuck if it's a little humid. Make sure you push it in all the way. Like this little
Yep.
stuff that I knew. And then they always have commented like, "Thank you so much for that video. It made me feel so comfortable going to the property because I didn't know where I was going and like what was going on. And you walking through the property, I knew instantly. Okay, here's this. Okay, this is where my cups are at. Here are my pots and pans. Here are the kitchen utensils. Oh, the firewood is over here. Not every guest watch it, but a lot do, and a lot. I'm a visual person. I would much rather watch that than read some really long description of everything, because I have a digital guidebook too. But
Yeah.
if I had an option between a 15-minute 10 or 15-minute YouTube video and
Oh, I'm watching that in a
I'm
heartbeat.
watching a YouTube video all day. That's just that's
Yeah.
just my
YouTube
personality.
University, man.
Yep. And so I put that in custom messages. I send that like a week out before with my guidebook. They can pick what they want to do, all that type of stuff. And then I send a message at 7. My check-in's at 4 p.m. I send a message at 7 o'clock saying, hey, how was check-in? Do you need anything? Like, how's that going? They always think it's me really messaging them
Yeah,
too,
of
which is
course, it's
funny.
phenomenal because
Yeah.
you and I type them up with like no capitalization.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
so
yeah.
so it's like I'm actually texting them.
Yep,
But I think
they-
that's so good there.
They think
A
it's
little
us all the time.
a
they
little
love
piece
it.
I wanted to add in. We have like you have to some of our units you convert the beds, so they're couches that you pull out because it's an RV. It's small spaces, so
Yeah.
we convert the beds. We have a QR code that people
Nice.
can scan and watch the video of me making the bed, so that they can do the
Nice.
same exact
That's
thing
very
that you guys
smart.
do.
Very smart.
But I love that tidbit. I think it's so cool to see other people doing similar things, and that's why I love doing this podcast, man.
Yeah.
To be able to hear your insights on the 14, because we do the same thing, but we don't do it as much. We do one when they reserve 7 days out, and then the day of check-in.
Yeah.
And then we do a checkout, and then like 2 days after the reservation.
Yeah.
For the review as well.
Yep. Same.
But I think that communication with them is so awesome. Now you have the software that sends the messages. Are you, if they respond, have a out of the blue question, are you the ones on comms that are responding?
Yeah, usually. So thing cool about Logify is it, it's an app on your phone. You have the website too, but I have an app on my phone. I get notifications. I'll get an instant notification. My business partner is on it too, but I pretty much handle all the communication. get it. It doesn't matter what app it came from, Airbnb, my direct booking, Verbo, anything like that. You know,
All through
obviously have
Lusify.
email too, and I send a message right back, and it's pretty easy. But at this point right now, like I haven't me sending out those videos and doing all those steps before. Like once the guests get there, they pretty much very rarely ask me about anything, you know, like, and it's great because
That's
that's why
so
I've done
awesome,
all
dude.
that information before for them.
That is the biggest key. The upfront work that you did
Yep.
to set up the property to make it as user friendly as Airbnb people are not the smartest people. Love
Yeah.
them to death.
Yep.
Love them to death. I am not talking poorly about our guests, but sometimes they are not the smartest people.
Yeah.
So having those very clear instructions on how to do everything is just, I mean, it's so amazing to be able to have that and to have that resource and the work that you put in ahead of time so that you're not on a consistent basis having to deal with issues, but then can focus on your time and energy on expansion, which is
Yep.
really the name of the game as a person who's running the glamping business is how can we expand in the best way possible, not having to deal with reoccurring issues that go on. I think it's so cool, man.
And if an issue comes up, like figure out how you can address that to make it where nobody's going to ask next time. Like one time somebody couldn't find out where the firewood was. Next day I put it in the guidebook. Like, hey, this is exactly where the fire. Or like I made sure that question wasn't going to be asked again, and I haven't had it asked ever since. So
That's so awesome, dude. That's so cool. Let's get into a mistake. Any mistakes that you've made along the way that you can kind of help someone who wants to start this business that they would try to avoid?
I'd say the biggest mistake I made was probably, I've said this a couple times. There's a few of them, but the main one is I bought probably more stuff than I needed to too early. I got real excited. I kind of filled up my Amazon cart and was doing all this and getting it going, and I would have stuff. And then like when I got to the final, like, or really started putting stuff in my dome or figuring out a theme and just by the end I was like, man, I probably bought some of this stuff and I really did need it. And like, just and now I got a garage full of stuff at my mom's house. And like,
Yep.
it's just like, I probably bought more stuff than I needed early on. And that was definitely my biggest mistake. I didn't spend a ton of money, but there was just things that you can hold off on buying all the little small things. Like you don't got to get like your big purchases, like whatever that is, that you need to make some decisions pretty early on, you know, like how your shower is or whatever. But like the small purchases, like you might even, I had a theme and then I changed the theme like a month before I even launched, you know, and I had all this
Yep.
one theme stuff and I'm like, well, now what do I do? I put it in another place, but that was probably my biggest mistake. And then other than that, I mean, I don't feel like I've made many mistakes. I've had some little small failures, like, you know, like paid more for the driveway than I probably should have. I did 3 layers of driveway and I should have done 2, let the contractors all work, and then done that last one when all the big trucks were done going, like small stuff like that. But you don't know that unless you
That's
know
part
it.
of it.
Like,
Yeah, that's
you
part
know,
of
like
that's part of the game. That's part of the fun of it.
You're gonna make a lot of small mistakes that you're just gonna have to accept and be like, okay, cool. But don't go Amazon shopping the day you decide to be a glamping expert, because you're gonna buy a bunch of stuff you do not need. I promise.
I also
to learn from experience.
to touch on that, I love the fact that you asked guests and then improved the stays from the guests. I think that also in the first month that we had our thing, we basically messaged all of our guests and say, hey, what would you add? What could we do to improve this place? And then that's when we started to really buy the extra stuff. So instead of buying that extra stuff, maybe go minimalistic, go super bare bones, and then add as guests are giving you suggestions for the first month. And I think that's a really good strategy. In maybe don't buy it all up front. Buy the necessities, obviously the bed, the sheets, the things that you need to have.
Yeah.
But when you want to get that $5,000 coffee table and put it in this specific area,
make sure you should think about that one.
Just think about if they're really going to use it. I've also found that staying at the property, staying there for a couple days and seeing what I do and seeing when do I use this service? When do I use the propane? When do I use the different amenities, and then what can I add to make that amenity a little bit better? I think that was a big thing for us on because you don't really understand guests are going to be using unless someone stays there for a
Absolutely.
day or two. So
100% agree
whether
with
you're
that.
going to stay there or you have a friend stay there, I think that's also a really, really big option as well.
I lived in my place
Last,
for a week.
oh, see, there you go,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, and I learned I learned all the things wrong with it. No, that's a very very good point that absolutely needs to be hammered home. You have to stay in your place to figure out
Yeah.
because there's going to be some things that you need to know that every little place is like that. You're like, oh, this door kind of creaks or something, or like there's
Yeah.
going to be little stuff.
Or
No
you
place
have
is going to
to
be perfect, and you have to know it.
tug on the key a little bit
Yeah,
to get it
100%.
open. Yeah. Last thing, man. First of all, Garrett, dude, it is so great having you, man.
Thank you.
I feel like I'm looking at like me, and I'm like I want to be where that guy is. It's so awesome to hear all of these experiences that you've had. Last thing I want to kind of touch on is I call it the experiential travel podcast because I believe we're in the space of experiential travel. We're offering experiences to our guests. We're not offering a hotel stay to sleep and then wake up and go to work. We're not offering a long-term real estate place to pay rent every single month. We're offering a night, 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights tops. I mean, I'm not sure how long your reservations are. We're not getting the 2-week reservations. We're getting the
Never.
1 to 3, 1 to 2 nights. And I call it the experiential travel podcast because the experiences that our guests are having are creating lifelong memories for them and their families, their loved ones. And those experiences and those memories that they're creating are so impactful to them and reciprocally to us because we get to live vicariously through them. And I think that do you have a story or a memory that pops out to you that you're like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing? Yes, it's profitable. Yes, it's a great way to cash flow and all the businessy side. But from a human personal side, do you have a story that is like reminds you why you're doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. The whole reason we started the place was because we really wanted to provide that experience to people. I lost a brother to suicide 15 years ago, and so I've always wanted to be able to allow people to feel free and just kind of forget about whatever is going on in their moments. And I've had quite a few. We have a lot of romantic stays. We've had tons of anniversaries. We've had a couple people propose, and they said yes, luckily each time. But then I had one that. A young lady came up from Houston. She hadn't seen her mom. Had just came in from Mexico, and she hadn't seen her mom in years. And I think her and her sister, they went out to the glamp site and they stayed there for a weekend. And she sent me one of the sweetest messages after, just talking about how they hadn't bonded in forever and how it was just so rewarding to like be in peace with her mom and just talk about things and just you could tell like how much it meant to her, and that meant everything to me at the same time too, that I could provide that for somebody to be able to connect in a space like that is so unique that it's already it's unforgettable to begin with, but then you add those type of elements to where there's nobody around you. Like you can just be one with nature, see all the birds, hear all the sounds and frogs and all that, the deer running and things like that. And they were just able to reconnect and really just build a bond that they hadn't seen each other in years. And I felt honored that they chose my place to do that in, and enough that they talked about like how they'll never forget those type of moments and things. And all guests have had great experiences, and that's one reason why we did set it up like that, because we wanted it. But hearing stories about families reconnecting and just sharing that type of bond is part of the reason why we honestly started it. So
That's amazing, Garrett. Dude, thank you so much. Thank you. And I wish nothing but success, prosperity, and expansion for what you're doing. And I think what you're doing is just phenomenal, man. And thank you for letting me pick your brain about a bunch of things. And I hope this gave insight to people that wanted to start their glamping business and how, not only financially, how well it pays off financially, but how it pays off, in a bigger purpose in life, in being able to affect people and change people and reconnect people. And I think that's really remarkable. Dude, you're the absolute man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having
being
me,
a part
man.
of this.
No, you're awesome, dude. I appreciate it.
and I look forward to having you on for another one soon.
Come on down to Texas, man. Can't wait to get in person.